The earth was quiet then. Not silent, for silence is the absence of breath, and even in devastation, the earth always breathes. But quiet, as if the world itself were holding a pause, waiting. Something had ended. Something else had not yet begun. And in that breathless space between the death of the old and the birth of the giants, the first shadow stirred. They were not large, not fierce, not kings, not yet. But they moved with a promise. They were the beginning of something that would not end quietly. Let us begin with a question. What does it feel like to inherit a world too broken to remember itself? To rise not into glory, but into vacancy. To walk across an earth still grieving, still trembling, still scorched. Because that is where the story of dinosaurs begins. Not in triumph, not with thunder, but in aftermath. It was the end of the Permian, a time when life had nearly vanished. The Great Dying, we call it. Not with poetry, but with precision. Volcanoes had poisoned the air. Oceans had turned to acid. The forests had gone silent. The sun, veiled in ash, had forgotten how to warm the land. More than 90% of marine life disappeared. More than 70% of vertebrate species on land were lost. Even the insects resilient and old were reduced. It was as close as life has come to stop. And then, it didn't. Somewhere in the thin light of the early Triassic, a world remade itself slowly, awkwardly, with scars too deep to hide. It was a harsher earth, hotter, dry, stretched across vast, cracked deserts where forests once grew. The continents were fused into one Pangea, a single colossal landmass, wrapped in drought and fire. And yet, across those sun-baked floodplains, in the shallows of long-dead rivers, beneath the shade of stunted ferns, life began to move again. It crawled, it crept, it rose. And in one quiet corner of this recovering world, something stood upright, balanced, fast, light. A body built for motion, a chest filled with dry air, eyes that saw in sharpness, jaws that seized opportunity. It did not look like a tyrant. It did not yet rule. But it carried something the others did not. A future. We would one day call it a dinosaur. We would give it names, place its bones behind glass, whisper stories into its silence. But in that moment, that first dawn, it had no name. It only had hunger and speed and possibility. It was not the strongest, not the largest, but it was ready. And the world at last was ready for it. What kind of world gives rise to an empire of giants? Not the one you'd expect. There were no lush jungles, no deep canyons echoing with roars, no green kingdoms waiting to be conquered. Only heat, only dust, only ruin. This was Pangea, a single continent stretched like sunburnt skin from pole to pole. It cracked beneath relentless sun. It trembled still from volcanic memory. Rivers ran dry. Forests were small, sparse, uncertain. And yet, from these unpromising conditions, the greatest dynasty the Earth has ever known took its first step. Before the dinosaurs, other creatures ruled the Earth. Strange ones. Thick-bodied synapsids mammal ancestors with sprawling gaits and tusked jaws. Armored archosaurs. Beaked herbivores with sprawling limbs. Odd creatures familiar only in the way dreams resemble memory. They had survived the extinction, but just barely. Their numbers were small. Their grip on the world, fragile. And in this space of vulnerability, of waiting for a new dominant form to rise, speed became power. Agility became survival. Lightness became life. And that is exactly what the dinosaurs brought, not as monsters, but as movers. The earliest dinosaurs were not the terrible lizards of legend. They were small, bipedal, fast, They lived in shadows, moved through twilight, watched, waited, chased. Eoraptor, Herrerasaurus, Saturnalia. These names come later. At the time, they were simply survivors, scavengers, opportunists, but they had something others did not posture. Balance. A body pulled upright by hips, designed not to sprawl, but to spring. Their feet pointed forward. Their tails counterbalanced their speed. Their lungs drew breath with greater efficiency. They didn't crawl. They ran. And in a world where everything else was recovering slowly, running was enough. This is the moment that matters. Because history so often remembers the largest, the loudest, the final forms. But the beginning is always softer. A shift in weight, a breath in the dust, a footfall too light to fossilize. These first dinosaurs didn't roar into power. They slipped into it, through cracks left by extinction, through quiet corridors of evolution. And once inside, they never left. That's what makes this moment so extraordinary. Not that dinosaurs conquered the world, but that the world broken and burning offered itself to those who could move first, the ones who could stand up and simply keep going. And that is what dinosaurs did. For the next 165 million years, they would become not just rulers, but architects of life on land. But before the horns, the plates, the wings, there was only this. A world that had emptied itself of kings. And something small stepping in to fill the silence. Let us now walk backward through stone. Not metaphor, but memory. Because the earth, though forgetful, leaves traces of its dreams pressed into mud, hardened by time, buried beneath layers of ash, flood, and silence. And here in these layers, we find the beginning. The rocks of the Ischigualasto Formation in Argentina tell one such story. Here in stone carved by wind and time lie the remnants of a world reborn. Triassic red beds, once floodplains now tilted and split open by mountain uplift. Within them, fossils whisper of twilight predators, herbivores with narrow skulls, and something new darting through the ferns, Eoraptor. Its name means dawn thief. And though it was barely a meter long, with light bones, grasping hands, and teeth both sharp and delicate, it was no thief. It was a messenger. A signal that something had arrived. Something bipedal, balanced, fast. With a brain slightly larger, a jaw more specialized, a stance that lifted its chest toward the horizon rather than dragging it along the ground. Other bones followed. Herrerasaurus, longer, leaner, hungrier. Saturnalia, graceful, lightly built, curious in form. They appear in South America, but soon also in Africa, India, Europe. The continents were still one. A single landmass, Pangea, and dinosaurs wandered its breadth. They were not yet dominant. They were not even numerous. But they were spreading. And when we follow their fossils, we are not following conquest. We are following adaptation. Not the best, not the strongest, simply the most willing to change. The bones themselves are poems, not of language, but of solution. The shape of the hip socket open, allowing the leg to swing beneath the body. The hollowing of vertebrae, a step toward lightness, toward breathing with air sacs. The fusion of wrist bones, an early whisper of wings. None of it was planned, but all of it worked. And the earth, dry, hot, unpredictable, rewarded what worked. As the Triassic progressed, climate chaos remained the rule. There were monsoons, then drought, ashfall, then recovery. Forests came and went like breath, and so did the creatures. Reptiles rose and vanished. Synapsids faded. Even the crocodile-line archosaurs, once the dominant lineage, began to fall. But the dinosaurs, they remained. Small, agile, persistent, not because they conquered, but because they endured. And perhaps that's the most important truth hidden in their bones. That empires are not always seized. Sometimes they are simply inherited. by those who can walk forward when everything else has crumbled. And in the deep red stone of the Triassic beneath dust that once fed ancient winds, the first dinosaurs walked. Not toward power, but because there was space, and because no one else was moving. The world was not finished with its convulsions. Just as life began to settle into a new rhythm, just as the first forests returned and the rivers carved themselves anew, the earth heaved once more. This time it came not in one place, but everywhere. Rift valleys tore open. Seas rose, then fled. Volcanoes stitched fire across the skin of continents. Atmospheres thickened, then cleared. And beneath it all, life trembled. It was the end of the Triassic, and with it another extinction. We don't speak of it as often, not like the great Permian die-off, nor the final asteroid at the close of the Cretaceous. But it was real, and it was wide. Roughly 200 million years ago, the world grew hot. CO2 levels soared, oceans acidified, and life again tightened its grip. Whole groups of reptiles vanished. The once dominant Cruratarsans, crocodile-line archosaurs, collapsed. Many mammal ancestors dwindled, reduced to shrew-like survivors in the shadows. But once more the dinosaurs remained, not untouched, but unbroken. They were still small, still scattered. But now there was room, and they began to fill it. This is the real beginning of the age of dinosaurs, not the birth of the first, but the moment the others fell away and left the stage wide open. From that moment forward, dinosaurs radiated. They evolved rapidly, creatively. Some remained swift and sleek. Others began to bulk hips, widen necks, lengthen spines, stretched into spires and sails. They spread across every corner of Pangea. They grew into roles the Earth had never written before. Towering browsers, pack hunters, feathered gliders, ocean wanderers, desert runners. What began as survival became mastery. What began as motion became architecture. The fossil record shifts in the rocks of the early Jurassic. Suddenly, dinosaurs are everywhere. You see them in footprints pressed deep into hardened mud. 3 toes, a long stride, a pause sometimes, as if the creature stopped to look back. You find them curled in nests, eggs ringed around a crouched mother. You find them mid-run, preserved by ash. You find them in herds, dozens of skeletons pointing the same direction, as if caught mid-migration by a flood they couldn't outrun. The Earth is no longer a place being survived. It is a place being shaped. This is the power of being first and staying long enough to change. By the middle of the Jurassic, dinosaurs had become more than animals. They were ecosystems. Their dung fertilized forests. Their trampling carved paths. Their deaths fed scavengers. Their roars, if they had them, reverberated through valleys carved by time. The small ones hunted insects. The large ones moved like mobile landscapes. Some had feathers, some had horns. Some eventually would rise into song, but all of them carried the seed of that first breath, that first step, that first dawn. Now the sun hangs higher. The forests have thickened. The rivers meander, no longer violent, but steady, drawing silver threads across the body of Pangea. And the air, it hums. Insects shimmer. Pterosaurs lift with the wind. And deep below the canopy, footsteps stir the leaf litter light and deliberate. We are now in the Jurassic. And the age of hesitation is over. Dinosaurs have become not just survivors, but architects of their world. The small ones swift, hollow-boned, and clever. Prowl in packs or dart alone through ferns. The great ones, long-necked, vast-bodied, thunder-footed, roam the floodplains like mountains in motion. Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus. Their necks sweep the trees like cranes. Their tails move like pendulums sculpting the air. They are not predators. They have no need to be. Their size is their answer, their height their survival. In the Jurassic heat they thrive, because they can. Elsewhere, the predators stalk. Allosaurus, with curved claws and gaping jaws, moves like a shadow through the light. Not the largest, but calculated. A master of angles and timing. Its arms are still strong, its legs tuned for pursuit, its teeth serrated, curved tools of precision. It does not kill for glory. It kills to continue. The forests make no judgment. The earth keeps no record of mercy, only balance. And the dinosaurs in all their variety become that balance. We find them everywhere now. In China, feathered theropods, delicate and bird-like, practicing a language of lift long before the sky belonged to wings. In Tanzania, coelophysoids with slender builds and sharp snouts carving niches in the undergrowth. In the Americas, stegosaurs with plated backs, tails bristling with spikes like walking fortresses of bone. In the fossil record, this age glows. Not with light, but with diversity, with response, with transformation. The Earth offers variety climates, terrains, pressures, and dinosaurs answer with form. Each species a sentence, each bone a revision. The language of adaptation spoken in pelvis, in claw, in beak. We are not watching an empire seize power. We are watching one grow from the soil up, grown from breath, from stride, from a willingness to move into the places no one else remained. And still beneath all this thunder, a whisper. The earliest forms remain. Small bipeds still scurry. Feathered forms still take root. The line that will one day lift into bird is already awake. It does not know its future. It does not aspire to flight. But the skeleton is ready. The lungs are strong. The balance perfected. The sky has not yet opened its gates, but the key is turning. The world too is shifting. Pangea begins to crack. What was once one continent now pulls apart into drifting pieces. Seas flood the lowlands. Islands rise. Isolation breeds invention. Evolution accelerates. And dinosaurs follow, filling every corner, every shadow. Not out of conquest, but out of presence. They are the rhythm to which the Mesozoic moves. Now we enter the golden stretch of time. The Cretaceous. The final act of the age of dinosaurs, not marked by decline, but by flourish. The earth is warm, humid, full of color. Seas slice into continents. Islands drift like slow-moving thoughts across the surface of the globe. And everywhere life responds with extravagance. What began with breath and bone now blooms with feathers and flowers. The great land masses have split. North America, South America, Africa, Asia. Separated, they evolve their own echoes of the empire, parallel dreams, shaped by wind and distance. In the west, the hadrosaurs rise, duck-billed giants with social minds and crested skulls. They graze in herds, their calls vibrating across lake beds and fern fields. Their bones show growth rings, rapid like birds. In the east, the ceratopsians dig into the land. Horned faces, frilled shields of bone eyes, forward always watching. Triceratops, majestic and wide. Pisidicosaurus, agile and bristled. In the south, the abelisaurs hunt short-skulled, thick-bodied, strange and specific to the heat. Carnotaurus, the meat bull with tiny arms and sculpted horns. And scattered across the continents in forests and coastal shallows, the theropods keep evolving. One branch grows smaller, more hollow, more feathered. They nest, they leap, they watch the trees. Their bones grow wishbones, their arms wings, their jaws beaks. And before the age of dinosaurs ends, one lineage will already be something else entirely. A bird. And still beneath all of this, the old giants walk. The titanosaurs, long-necked gods of the Cretaceous, make their slow pilgrimage across floodplains and inland deltas. Saltosaurus, Argentinosaurus, Alamosaurus. They no longer need to compete. The land is theirs, their size beyond strategy. Even their enemies barely challenge them. And above their heads, the flowering plants bloom. For the first time in Earth's long memory, petals unfold. Nectar flows. Pollinators hum. This is not just the age of dinosaurs. It is the age of ecological poetry. Each creature a verse in a system, vast and humming. This is the peak. Not a moment of single domination, but a chord, rich, full, harmonic. Dinosaurs in every niche. From sky to streambed, from desert to coast. Fast, armored, crested, winged. They are no longer an empire. They are the Earth. And so the Earth slows again. It breathes, it shines, it balances. It forgets perhaps that nothing lasts. Not even a golden age. The end did not come with warning. There was no omen in the sky, no silence that hinted at ruin. The rivers still flowed. The forests still shimmered. The herds still moved as they always had, through mud, through shadow, beneath the soft breath of distant stars. It was in many ways a perfect evening, and then everything changed. A rock, roughly 10 kilometers wide, moving faster than sound, falling from a silence too deep for even time to fill. It struck what is now Yucatan, but in that moment, it struck the world. The shock wave vaporized air. The ocean recoiled. The sky became fire. Within hours, the winds howled with hurricane force. Within days, the forests caught flame. Within weeks, the sun disappeared behind clouds of soot and sulfur, and the world grew cold. Too cold, too dark, too fast. The Chicxulub impact was not just a crater, it was a curtain, drawn closed on 165 million years of motion-balanced breath. The dinosaurs whose bones had mapped the globe, whose shadows had danced across every biome, were not prepared. They had never needed to be. No empire can imagine the hour when it no longer rules. Some died instantly, caught in the blast, in the firestorms, in the collapsing food chains. Others lingered, but without light, plants could not grow. Without plants, the herbivores starved, and without prey, the hunters fell silent too. Soon the ground held nothing but bones and seeds, waiting for a different world. But not all was lost, because the dinosaurs did not end, not truly. They had already made a decision unconsciously, slowly, millions of years before the sky cracked open. They had learned to leap, to nest in trees, to shrink, to warm their blood, to carry feathers not just for display, but for life. And when the asteroid fell, some of those small feathered forms took flight into the night, into the dust, into the next world. They would become the birds. Today you hear them every morning, calling from rooftops, wading through ponds, soaring through thermals, just as their ancestors once did above tyrannosaur brows. Each one a living echo of an empire that ended in fire but survived in song. So much of deep time ends in silence. But not this time. This time the age of giants left a voice, and it sings still. We are not apart from deep time. We are inside it. Though we wear watches and calendars, though we pave over fossils, though we name ourselves modern, we are still animals in the age of consequence. The age of stone gave way to iron to circuits to cloud. But beneath every skyscraper is bedrock that once bore dinosaur weight. And in every human breath are atoms once cycled through fern, through lizard, through volcano ash. You live inside borrowed elements. Every calcium in your bones may once have formed a stegosaur's plate. Every drop of oxygen might have passed through a sauropod's lung or a ginkgo leaf under a Jurassic sun. You are made of memory older than your species, older than mammals, older than flowers. You are in truth a continuation, and that truth carries weight. Because for the first time in Earth's story, a species has learned to read its own history, to decipher the bones, to measure isotopes, to predict the coming fires before the smoke rises. We know what comes next if we are not careful. We've seen it before in the ash beds, in the voids, in the the sudden absences. But unlike the past, we now have the choice to change course, to reduce harm, to move not out of instinct, but out of intention. The dinosaurs had no warning. The asteroid did not negotiate. The Earth turned red, and it ended. But we're not bound to the same script. We can step softly, rewild what has been severed, listen more closely to the rhythms that carried life through extinction and into rebirth. And when we forget, as we often do, we need only look up at the arc of a gull, the flash of iridescent feathers, the precise geometry of flight. It is all still with us. The story is not closed. It spirals, it climbs, it dreams forward. And in that spiral, in that breath, in that wing beat, is hope. Let us then drift onward into the breath, between eras, where wings whisper of origin, and the sky still remembers what it once meant to rise from bone. Flight did not begin in triumph. It began in flutter, in the tremble of limbs, once meant for grasping, now catching air instead. Not soaring, not yet, but falling with grace. Somewhere in the Cretaceous hush beneath trees that bore the first flowers, a creature leapt not to escape, but to test, to see what the air would allow. To feel the lift that came not from certainty, but from faith. Feathers came before flight, before speed, before sky. They were warmth, display, camouflage. But evolution is a poet who repurposes metaphors, and so warmth became lift. Color became signal, and balance became flight. Archaeopteryx left its ghost in limestone, of frozen, mid-motion limbs, spread mouth open as if startled by its own shadow. It did not yet own the air. It borrowed it, as all flyers must, moment by moment. But it marked something sacred, a turning, a new clause in the long sentence of life. And now the sky is full of their descendants. Sparrows, falcons, gulls, cranes, each a line rewritten. Each a reminder that the story of dinosaurs never ended. It simply lifted, and in every wing beat there is not just survival, but continuation. A swan gliding at dusk carries the architecture of the Triassic in its chest. A kestrel hovering over a field remembers with its bones what it meant to chase. The Earth holds many miracles, but none greater than this, that something once clawed, scaled, and land-bound could become something so delicate, so precise, so full of sky, not through magic, not through prophecy, but through time, through patience, through thousands of quiet steps toward lift. And when we say birds are dinosaurs, it is not to diminish them. It is to honor the thread that held, the breath that stayed, the lineage that found a way to sing after the world fell silent. Shall we now follow that thread into modern time, where wings still beat and bones still remember, even as we forget? Then let us walk gently now from ancient skies into modern streets, where pigeons huddle on telephone wires and crows solve puzzles beside vending machines, where gulls scream over concrete harbors and finches gather in the branches of trees we planted without knowing they'd sing. The age of dinosaurs never ended. It changed to shape. It softened its stride. It folded its thunder into feathers and threaded its past into the lightness of now. When you watch a bird truly watch, you're watching a survivor of fire and flood and cold and void. A creature that remembers ash in its marrow. Its beak is not just a tool, it is a relic, carved by time as precisely as the horn of a triceratops or the tooth of a raptor. Its bones, air-filled and strong, are the final echo of a long, hollow-boned prayer, first whispered in the Jurassic. Its songs are not merely music, they are inheritance, the reshaped roar of a vanished kingdom. And yet, how often we forget, how easily we pass by a heron in the reeds, a hawk on the wire, a swallow stitching the sky with grace. But the Earth remembers. Every morning it lets birds rise again, not just to feed, but to remind us that life endures, even now, even here, even in a world crowded with noise scarred by loss tilting beneath our weight. The sky is still open. The branches still hold nests. The bones still carry the blueprint of ancient motion. And we children of fire and feather alike still carry the question, what will we leave behind? What bones will speak of us? There is a museum somewhere quiet, sunlit its walls lined with glass. Behind each pane bones, arranged not as death, but as memory, as motion, as possibility. Children stand before the skeleton of a theropod, eyes wide, jaws slack. They do not yet know the names, but they feel the shape of all, and that is enough. Elsewhere, a paleontologist kneels in dust brush in hand, clearing away the last grains from a vertebra so old it predates language itself. It is not just work, it is listening, because to study these bones is to hear the world hum beneath its silence, to touch something that never expected to be touched again, and perhaps to feel touched in return. The fossil does not speak, but it does not need to. Its shape is its sentence, its presence, its reply. I lived, it says. I moved, I endured, and now so do you. This is the long breath we all belong to. So when you next hear the rustle of wings overhead, or find the imprint of a fern in stone, or see the shadow of a hawk circle your path, remember, you are walking through the memory of giants. You are the continuation of something that once crawled from the sea, stood in dust, and looked toward the light. The earth does not forget. It waits, and it offers. It gave the dinosaurs their dawn. It gives you yours. So breathe, step carefully, and carry the story forward. Because the rhythm of life is long, and your footstep is now part of it. If you felt the breath of deep time, if you saw yourself in the bones, if you believe that life remembers, then subscribe to the Lost World Files. Because the story of Earth is still unfolding, and together we will follow its ancient rhythm, one fossil, one breath, one forgotten echo at a time.